Good morning and welcome to Rising. We have a wonderful show for you today, and we're happy to be here, and we're wide awake, aren't we?
Yeah, and you know what? I was in Colorado for 3 days over the weekend, MLK weekend, and my eyes weren't tearing, my allergies weren't bothering me. I'm back in D.C. for a day and a half, and I feel the waterworks coming on. What's up with the allergies out here?
They are bad. I have noticed that. I've had bad allergies, seasonal allergies all my life. They're just as bad here as they are anywhere else, but there's certainly no relief to be had.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to hopefully changing weather.
Well, we're going to get some in a few days.
Oh, a snowstorm.
Yeah.
We need to talk about that. Coming up on Rising, we'll recap some of the highlights from day one of the World Economic Forum meeting in Davos, Switzerland, where various world leaders seem to take shots at President Trump.
Plus, the DOJ has subpoenaed Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey for allegedly obstructing an immigration enforcement investigation.
And actor Matt Damon went viral after telling Joe Rogan how Netflix restructuring movies to fit modern day attention span kind of rubs him the wrong way. First, Robby, what's on your radar?
Rubs me the wrong way as well, and I'll talk about it in a minute. But first, Governor Gavin Newsom can't handle the truth, or at least isn't able to articulate what the truth is. Here he was flubbing a very basic and fundamental question from Ben Shapiro about whether men can become women.
But this idea that Trump says people are going to public schools and coming back, having surgeries and coming back the next day is absurd.
No, but there are certainly cases in which kids are being quote unquote socially transitioned at school without parents knowing about it. I know some of the parents to whom this has happened. I mean, this is the fundamental question that lies at the root of all of this is the question that you're not wanting to answer, which is whether boys can become girls.
Yeah, I think I'm for the grace of God. Yeah.
I mean, I appreciate the sympathy. I also feel terrible for anybody who's suffering with any sort of
I think it's
mental or
been
physical
the
condition.
case
That's
for
terrible, but
generations, for time immemorial. God bless.
Well, he's not the only one, of course, who struggles to have a coherent answer. Most Democrats, including most of the 2028 contenders, do not want to answer even easier questions about transgender issues. Axios tried to get them on the record on whether trans girls should compete against biological girls in women's sports. And most people dodged that question entirely. Almost all ducked it, writes Axios' CEO. Let's be specific. The list of Democrats who would not even bother responding to that simple question is as follows: Kamala Harris, AOC, J.B. Pritzker, Cory Booker, Andy Beshear, Chris Murphy, Ro Khanna, and Gavin Newsom. The ones who did respond to the question were Josh Shapiro, Pete Buttigieg, and Rahm Emanuel. Shapiro said he did not want trans athletes to have an unfair advantage. Emanuel said flatly, no, they shouldn't compete. And Buttigieg said, well, this was largely a question for sports leagues, not the government. Credit to them, I guess, for even bothering to respond, because most Democrats don't want to admit that they either agree with their radical progressive base on this issue, or more likely are afraid of offending their radical progressive base. Now, trans people, of course, deserve dignity and compassion, equal treatment. The government should not interfere with private medical decisions, in my view, made by consenting adults. With children, it's different. We all broadly accept that the state does take an interest in determining what medical care is appropriate for minors. And then, when we get to youth sports and schools and those accommodations, it's obvious that we need sane policies the vast majority of Americans agree with, which put common sense limitations in place. We cannot have a teenage boy declare himself a teenage girl and suddenly gain access to the girls' locker room or inclusion on the girls' swim team, because that would be completely ridiculous. And if Democrats do not realize that that is ridiculous, and more importantly, admit it's ridiculous, they're going to lose elections. Don't tell Tim Miller that, though. The Bulwark commentator responded to the Axios inquiry on X, writing, "Can a man become a woman is such a rage-bait BS question. It has no bearing on policy. In a free country, an adult can become whatever they want if they don't harm others. The DHS secretary has an entirely new face, and the president wears more makeup than most drag queens." Okay, but wearing a lot of makeup does not magically transform a man into a woman, and a facelift doesn't change a woman into a man. That's kind of the whole point of this debate, that the fundamental truth of a person's biology remains constant despite surface-level cosmetic changes, even very invasive ones. Or at least that's what most people believe. If you feel differently, Democratic presidential aspirants, well, you're welcome to say so. See something? Say something. How about that?
Yeah.
Heard you chuckling, Lindsey?
Read that Bulwark quote again.
That he wears as much makeup as a drag queen.
Does the president, do you find that he wears that much makeup?
I don't know. We all wear makeup on TV. I'm wearing makeup right now. I don't wear makeup in my personal life. Many ladies do. That's fine. Some men do, most don't. I don't in my personal life, but we all do for television.
Okay, I'll reel it in.
But when you wear wearing makeup doesn't turn you into a girl.
It doesn't. And
so that was a little ridiculous there, Tim.
Okay, so I think like everybody's conflating every issue. The sports issue for me is, well, everyone who's asking the question, can men become women? Like, okay, that is a little bit of rage bait. And then there's also just answer the question about the sports, the schools, like the small nominations that this is happening in, like to address it. Yes, there should be just, maybe there's an open gender bathroom. Maybe there's a girls and boys. I don't really care. In school, I would like my kid to learn. I don't think this is a huge issue. But also in that interview that we saw with Governor Gavin Newsom, something that I wanted to bring up is that he said never has so much attention been paid to so few people. And I think, again, when you look at what's happening in the transgender community, 1% of people in the U.S. identify as transgender. Yeah. But this is every single question on the minds of every single podcaster.
Well,
every single conservative person.
Well,
like a gotcha. And it's like, what are we doing? Because, like, okay, maybe they shouldn't compete in the Olympics. But
it takes a small number of them to win at the sport.
I know, but because there's an avoidance happening in the Democratic Party, I think maybe part of that is just having respect, because not a lot of people from the actual trans community are ever included or considered in the conversation. And I'm talking about of sound mind that have a dialogue about transitioning as an adult. So maybe we bring some more adults in the room to discuss how they're feeling about themselves and stop being these outsiders always trying to impose.
No one's complaining about the adults transitioning. That's fine. I support that. I don't care.
The question is can a girl become a boy? And it's like, okay, so you want me to tell this grown adult who transitioned that they can't possibly do that? Like, why does that matter to Gavin Newsom? If that question is like, can you become, to them they can. He's like, live and let live. That's his biggest thing, is to live and let live. So why is it, let God judge them? Like, all these people with all these religious values, okay, so it's not for you, then don't be trans. You don't be trans if you don't want to. Why do you want to condemn the entire community?
Okay. Live and let live, I agree with, but this is an issue because there are public policies attached to it and there are public accommodations attached to it, and people are uncomfortable not wanting said individuals. Again, I don't care for whatever, the bathroom at the airport. Who cares? I agree. I don't care. The bathroom is not some sacred space. The public, like, whatever. But locker rooms, it's an uncomfortable time for teenagers. Having to be, disrobe, changing for sports games in front of other people. I would like more privacy in that regard anyway, just for young people. It's a horrifying experience for a lot of kids. But you can't just have people can change their label at whim and then gain access to those facilities for teenagers, and then, more importantly, compete on the actual teams. It's not competitive.
This is not
just blow them out of the water.
This is not sweeping the globe of like the biggest problem.
There only has to be one in the league for them to win every.
Oh my gosh!
They'll be the state champion.
Okay, so perhaps
that's true.
Perhaps we should develop a trans league then. Perhaps we should, but it also
to your point, there's not enough. I agree that would be a better outcome. Right, to your point, there's not enough of it.
But that's what I mean about including people in the conversation to figure out what the next steps are, rather than trying to isolate and say your experience is not valid, and so we're just going to discredit that you believe this is your life experience, right? It's not for Gavin Newsom or some of these leaders to determine that. They're like, why am I jumping in this conversation that affects 1% of America? The way that Republicans line it up is that it's overly taking over the world. Every sport, my kid's not going to have an opportunity to go to college because our scholarship's going to be taken by somebody.
I mean, that happens.
Like, no.
That happens.
But it's not running amok. So why? So the economy's bad. There's other things that are happening. Why don't we focus on something that makes sense to focus on, rather than trying to have a gotcha moment with Gavin Newsom?
Don't focus on argument. Okay, yes. Is it the most important issue facing the human civilization? Well, no, but no specific issue is. You can delegitimize a conversation about everything based on that, because unless we're talking about thermonuclear war or something, then it doesn't seem as important. I don't know why Democrats can't just admit that the far left base has gone insane on this for the accommodations for kids, and there should be nobody who's biologically male competing against.
Well, Ben Shapiro's question wasn't specifically about kids. He did ask if a man can become a woman, right, biologically. So that was going to overarchingly give an answer to the community, to say that he doesn't see the adult's experience, which I would
just say, no, you can't change the number of chromosomes you have. You can become a man can become a trans woman, and there's a new category for that, and that's fine, and that deserves accommodations, but you can't change the number of chromosomes you have, is how I would answer the question.
Coming up on Rising, President Trump is currently speaking at the World Economic Forum conference in Davos, Switzerland. We'll also discuss day one of the conference up next. We'll be right back.
The World Economic Forum kicked off this week in Davos, Switzerland, but the conference clearly feeling the shadow of President Trump amid his push to acquire Greenland.
Now, President Trump kicked off his speech earlier this morning by criticizing Europe. Take a listen to a little bit of what he had to say.
Friends come back from different places. I don't want to insult anybody and say I don't recognize it. And that's not in a positive way. That's in a very negative way. And I love Europe, and I want to see Europe go good, but it's not heading in the right direction.
Meantime, French President Emmanuel Macron began his remarks yesterday by making a subtle dig at the U.S. president, but quickly shifted to a much darker tone. Let's take a listen.
And it's a time of peace, stability, and predictability. A shift towards autocracy against democracy, more violence, more than 60 wars in 2024, an absolute record, even if I understood a few of them were fixed. A shift towards a world without rules, where international law is trampled underfoot, and where the only law that seems to matter is that of the strongest, and imperial ambitions are resurfacing.
Now, Macron went on to list the Russia-Ukraine conflict as well as the conflict in the Middle East as examples of those imperial ambitions, but some critics are saying he was also referencing Trump.
And I believe he had something wrong with his eye, which is why he was wearing those glasses, which was kind of a cool look.
I thought he looked super cool.
Yeah. People made fun of him online for that, though. The French and American presidents, meanwhile, have been on the rocks recently after Macron refused to join Trump's Board of Peace. Trump also leaked a private message from the French president ahead of the two meeting in Davos. It reads in part, "My friend, we are totally in line on Syria. We can do great things on Iran. I do not understand what you are doing on Greenland. Let us try to build great things."
That confusion seems to be how many European leaders feel right now. Yesterday, Trump trolled the continent with this AI-generated photo of him planting a flag on Greenland. His consistent pressure to take over the Arctic island is prompting some across the pond to urge less reliance on the United States. EU Commissioner Ursula von der Leyen yesterday called for permanent independence from the U.S., vowing to be, quote, unflinching in the face of Trump's push for Greenland.
Planting that flag.
Yeah.
Manifest destiny. It shall be ours, Lindsey.
This is like so antagonistic to watch what's happening in Davos at this economic forum, where usually our allies, particularly the ones in NATO, like Greenland, are all on the same page and going there to talk about how the world's economies can work better together. But instead, they're throwing shade at President Trump because he is making them feel like a need to put militarized, full gear people on the ground in Greenland to protect the country from being taken over like this is imperial times by the president, who's just like, well, my way or the highway. And he is threatening these countries with tariffs already. He's saying like 10% tariff just because you guys are pushing back against me and not agreeing with my plan, or making people join his Gaza peace plan, which a lot of countries don't think that they align with.
Why don't they want to enjoy the
because he wants to charge each
plan?
country, like Mark Carney in Canada was like, heck no. He wants an agreement for a long-term $1 billion commitment. Maybe some countries don't want to commit that financially. You can understand.
So we got to commit we got to pay all the money to rebuild Gaza?
We were Israel's biggest ally in destroying Gaza. I mean, we funded it wholeheartedly. So I would say we pay more of a portion than the rest of the countries. Wouldn't you say that, since we funded it, or you forgot that part that we helped?
I didn't want to fund it.
That?
Well, I didn't want to fund
Well,
it.
here we are. Here we are. So should we not? Should we leave it demolished? Some of these European leaders...
I wouldn't, to be clear, I would not have demolished it in the first place. Very much so. I do not like paying to blow things up and then paying to rebuild them. I don't like it to be all on America. You know what? We can't work out the Middle East. We've been trying for a long time, and it doesn't want to be worked out. They don't want our help. We're not helping. Let's just sit. Let's actually resign from this Board of Peace and let Europe take a crack at it. I'm sick of it. I don't want to be involved anymore.
I think the bigger point is the fact that the president is threatening people that don't behave accordingly and don't act accordingly. So France is saying don't attack an ally. You already have the opportunity to put boots on the ground in Greenland. You have an agreement that's existed since the 50s, the 1950s, to be able to access that space for military operations if you need to. Why do you need to own the place when they have vehemently said we're not interested? I think there's European leaders just trying to stand up saying the U.S. can't bully you around.
Is the U.S.'s position.
But why is this coming up right now? The president just wants to take over wherever he wants to. No, it just is not acceptable. I mean, give me a thorough explanation about why this is so important right now. He's saying ships are
Trump doesn't recognize the sovereignty of the tiny European island of Denmark over this giant landmass proximate to the American continent.
So are we not acknowledging that he also
sent
a message about him not getting the Nobel Peace Prize, and that's part of the reason?
Just as England once laid claim to a vast swath of this continent, that we rebelled against them and cast off their leadership and said we will govern ourselves. Similar things done to France and Spain and Portugal. Similarly, why should Denmark rule this distant landmass? That is what Trump is asking.
And Trump
it's a question that generations of Americans have asked about European leadership and interference in our affairs. We've said no. We've said this land is our land.
Trump's response for why we're doing this, we saw in a message that says, well, if he would have gave me the Nobel Peace Prize, perhaps I wouldn't be going down this route. And I'm paraphrasing, but he's saying, well, peace is not, the U.S. is my number one priority now because he didn't get the Peace Prize.
The U.S. should have been the number one priority all
Well,
along.
his priorities change when it benefits him personally. We know that already, right? That's obvious. And so if the fact that you think this now is a good time because the U.S. is now a priority for the president as opposed to him getting a Nobel Peace Prize and accusing the entire area as the reason why he didn't get the Peace Prize is inappropriate. And so if we're only going after this nation because we need this ultimate protection and we already have access to put soldiers there, and now he didn't get a Peace Prize and we're immediately having this knee-jerk reaction, that's not a good leadership. And so Europe should call that out. That's what Governor Gavin Newsom said when he was down there.
Gavin Newsom
invited himself to Davos.
He's on the side of Europe.
He agrees that people should stand up. European
Him and Alex Soros, who I saw he took a picture of with George Soros's son or grandson, the successor, the heir to the Soros throne. So that's nice. He wants to align against Americans and with Europeans. What a interesting strategic.
I don't think he's aligning against Americans. I think he's saying what Trump is doing is un-American, and so people should align against what the president is trying to do.
Wanting Greenland to be part of America
because he didn't get a Nobel Peace Prize. Yes, because they're an ally and they're a NATO member, and we can go put boots on the ground if we need to protect ourselves. Like something that Amber brought up is that our facilities there are a little decrepit and they need some remodeling. We can invest resources into remodeling some places or stations where soldiers would be and protect ourselves to the most thorough level, but we don't need to own the place.
Well, maybe the Danes can pay for it then, and we'll just hang out.
Well, we're just collecting money from everybody because Trump says so, and that's what he wants to do.
Next up, French wines could not get costlier they could get costlier. He thought they couldn't get costlier. They can. President Trump is threatening a 200% tariff on French wine after Macron reportedly rejected being part of the Gaza Peace Board. Don't go anywhere. President Trump on Monday threatened to impose 200% tariffs on French wines if President Emmanuel Macron declined to join his proposed Board of Peace for Gaza. Let's listen.
Oh, did he say that? Well, nobody wants him because he's going to be out of office very soon. So, that's all right. What I'll do is if they feel like Costo, I'll put a 200% tariff on his wines and champagnes, and he'll join. But he doesn't have to join.
Trump also announced a 10% import tariff on all products from several European countries, including France, who have condemned his push to acquire Greenland.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, and Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner will serve on the executive board to help stabilize daily life in Gaza. The White House said in a statement, each executive board member will oversee a defined portfolio of critical to Gaza's stabilization and long-term success, including but not limited to governance, capacity building, regional relations, reconstruction, investment attraction, large-scale funding, and capital mobilization.
According to Politico, Macron's office said the Board of Peace proposal, quote, goes beyond the framework of Gaza and raises serious questions, in particular with respect to the principles and structures of the United Nations, which cannot be called into question.
Countries invited to join the Board of Peace for Gaza include close U.S. allies such as Canada, Britain, and Saudi Arabia, as well as countries like Russia and Belarus. So far, the United Arab Emirates has publicly committed to joining the Peace Board. The New York Times reports that Argentine President Javier Milei and Prime Minister Viktor Orban of Hungary have also said they would be joining.
So we talked about this a little bit earlier because I just think it's the way that the president treats our allies. And I think even going to the economic forum and the way that he's threatening things there and our contentious relationship around Greenland, it all has to do with the way that if President Trump wants you to bend the knee and act submissively, then he's going to bully you into that behavior. And I think whether it's sending tariffs over to our allies in the past, like he's done to Canada, or what he's doing right now in France, it's all a problem for us. And the fact that he brought up Costco, a company that's now suing the administration for raising prices on consumers for tariffs that may or may not be seen as legal down the line, I think this is not a good one. We're about to tax champagne, right? We're going to drastically increase the price of champagne in the U.S. We're going to disrupt consumers. We're going to disrupt liquor stores and also cause people to perhaps lose jobs if they're filling their liquor stores with these more expensive things, then they can't pay the same price for the labor. And so with somebody who has a weak rating on the economy and jobs are not the best in this country and inflation is not the best, this move for the president is silly going into the midterms.
Well, we're about to find out if the tariffs that he does by executive decree are even constitutional. The Supreme Court is considering this right now. We don't know how they're going to rule. I think the president doing tariffs without Congress voting on it is unconstitutional, should be unconstitutional. I always say tariffs are just taxes. They're taxes on us. If we raise tariffs on French wines, that means they raise the price of the French wines, or it's on the domestic side that this cost is being paid. It's not that France has to pay more money to sell wine. It's that we have to pay more money receiving the wine. So you say it's punishing France, and it does punish them because we'll buy less wine, but Americans wanted to buy the wine. So it's really punishing Americans because we were the market for this product, which is why this whole tariff policy is so backward. It hurts the people who want to buy the good, which is Americans. So I'm not in favor of these policies. I hope they are ruled unconstitutional because it's ruining the entire economic paradigm that he wants to set up, that he was bragging so much about. I was listening to Trump in the makeup room as we were getting ready. We were listening to what Trump was having to say in Davos about how great the economy is, and all right, man, a lot of Americans don't feel that way. It's manifesting a similar tone deafness, I think, to President Biden, who was insisting the economy was fine, even as so many Americans were telling him in polls that they didn't feel that way. So we'll see how that affects things. But again, this whole thing could be undone at a catastrophe, because then they'll have to reimburse the affected companies. And Trump is very concerned about that prospect, saying, well, this is going to bankrupt us. Like, well, that was a good reason not to do it. Or to get Congress to do it. You have control of Congress. Just if you implement the policy vis-a-vis the actual legislative process, then it doesn't come under attack like this. But they just refuse to do it. So we'll see.
We can talk about this ad nauseum, but also offering the American public checks for the same amount that they're paying, that you're tariffing. It's like you're trying to make an answer to a problem that you created. And if the goal is long-term, like stop depending on foreign nations.
It's just like Rube Goldberg device. I'm going to make it twice as much expensive for you to buy something, and then I'm going to send you a check for the why. Just don't do it in the first place.
Next on Rising, I'll take a look back at the first year of President Trump's second term and how his record compares to his campaign promises. Stick around for my lens.
All right, Lindsay, what's in your lens today?
Let's talk about it. So when President Donald Trump returned to office last January, he declared the start of a golden age of America. 1 year into his second term, what we've actually experienced feels less like a golden age and more like a political stress test, full of speed, spectacle, and sharp division. Now, to be fair, Trump has delivered on several core campaign promises. He ran on peace through strength, and his administration helped broker a ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war. That fragile deal has held and since now moved into its second phase. On immigration, Trump followed through on his pledge to aggressively crack down. According to the Brookings Institution, the U.S. experienced negative net migration in 2025 for the first time in at least 50 years, largely due to fewer people entering the country. Gas prices are actually lower than last year. He passed his long-promised bill extending Trump-era tax cuts. Now, these are tangible wins for supporters who actually wanted this action. But accomplishment does not equal approval. And that's where the disconnect starts to begin. A Quinnipiac poll found 57% of voters disapprove of how ICE is enforcing immigration laws, a discontent that spilled into protests following the death of Renee Good in Minnesota. A CNN SSRS poll released Friday found that 58% of Americans say Trump's first year of his second term has been a, quote, failure. Part of that distraction stems from promises that collapsed under scrutiny. DOGE, for example, the administration's high-profile government-slashing initiative, promised $2 trillion in savings. After shuttering USAID and laying off thousands of federal workers, Elon Musk acknowledged the effort saved about $160 billion, a fraction of the $2 trillion cut that was sold to voters on the campaign trail. Then there's the whole tariff chaos. Trump rolled out sweeping tariffs on nearly all U.S. trading partners on what he dubbed, quote, Liberation Day. Markets recoiled, stocks lost nearly $3.1 trillion in value in a single day, despite promises of a manufacturing boom. The final jobs report of 2025 showed hiring cooling across the entire economy. And while politicians argue over optics, Americans are still paying more. Inflation is up 2.7% year over year. The typical household is spending $184 more per month than last year and $590 more than 3 years ago, according to Moody's Analytics. Grocery prices are not down in any meaningful way. Energy, medical care, coffee, and ground beef all cost more. Healthcare, after a government shutdown on President Trump's watch last year, Trump finally unveiled his great healthcare plan, a framework so vague that top officials admitted the details were sparse. But perhaps the most consistent success story of Trump's second term belongs to himself. According to an analysis by the New York Times editorial board, President Trump has used the office of his presidency to make at least $1.4 billion, a figure they stress is a minimum. This comes from overseas licensing deals to cryptocurrency sales. The line between public service and private gain has never looked thinner. A hotel in Oman, an office tower in Western India, a golf course on the outskirts of Saudi Arabia. These are just a few of the more than 20 overseas projects that the Trump organization is pursuing, often requiring cooperation with foreign governments. 1 year in, Trump has acted aggressively on his agenda, but polling and economic data suggest many Americans are unconvinced those actions have improved their daily lives. So Trump's pretty wealthy. He has all these connections that we can see direct lines of how cooperation of foreign governments leads to agreements on his end that benefit other countries. And so that can be frowned upon. But the same guy who was America First gets a low rating on the economy, the thing that he most campaigned on, and also tons of criticism about some of the policies that he did implement that people may have supported on the campaign trail, like immigration. He does have immigration down, but 57% of people in this Quinnipiac poll disagree with the way he's going about it. So I think there's a lot of issues in year one that make overall look like this wasn't a success. And the biggest one is the fact that the economy is not better. You can't do the same thing Biden did. And you talked a little bit about that in the last segment, is say, oh, it might feel bad, but it really is good. Look at these poll numbers. Like, that's not real. People are either paying more or less. People are either more comfortable or not. They're looking at your first term and you're referring to making America great again and reminding people of how he felt that he revived the economy in 2017. And then people are like, well, can you do it again? And the answer seems like no.
Yeah, it has been a challenging year. The administration came in, new administration, with all this power, with a mandate, with winning the popular vote too. This was Trump's greatest success. He has legislative majorities, and I think it's disappointing that they have not tried to achieve more or to make more permanent. Trump has, issued executive order after executive order to bring about his vision of the economy, of immigration, of so many other issues. But there's a sense in which it's very impermanent because they have not put it into law with the force of legislation, and the courts, despite being very conservative leaning, don't have an indication that they're just going to rubber stamp everything that he does. The Supreme Court might undo his tariffs in a very dramatic way any day now, any hour, which would be an incredible blow. He tried to fire lots of government employees, brought Elon Musk in to reshape the federal bureaucracy, which I thought was one of the best ideas he'd had. And that fizzled out. It didn't stick. So much of this won't stick. And I think that's what's bad. So he is acting most boldly in the domain of foreign policy because that is where the president is most unconstrained and where there's a long history of not having to go to Congress, of Congress being the junior partner. Again, that's not the way the founders intended it to be, but it has been already established by previous presidents that the presidency can just act and do what they want in terms of foreign policy. So that's where he's focused so much of his attention. But as much as I think there has been definitely a mixed bag, some good, some ill on foreign policy, the American people, I won't say that it's not that they don't care about foreign policy, but it's that their wallets, their pocketbooks, the prices they pay for things, the availability of houses, of child care support, their immediate economic reality is their top concern. Foreign policy, it doesn't pierce the bubble of the average American person to the degree that the media thinks it does. The media is obsessed with foreign policy. Reporters always like talking about, everybody's a poli-sci major in journalism. Everybody's obsessed with global affairs and moving pieces on a chessboard and the great risk map of our planet. And Americans, when they go to the ballot box, are usually thinking about the price of eggs, whether housing prices have gone up, what the healthcare policy is going to be, those sorts of things, and what the immigration policy is going to be, very much, which is an issue where Donald Trump still enjoys a lot of support compared to Democrats, even though you're right that some of the people who came into his coalition are not happy about the excesses of the enforcement. It's very showy, very tough guy. I'm uncomfortable with it too. But there's no trust. The American people have so little trust in the Democratic Party on this issue because of how badly Joe Biden bungled it. And that is a reputational harm the party has suffered that will take a generation to undo, I think.
I think people are also just wondering, what he didn't campaign on putting Maduro in jail. He didn't campaign on
just a nice little bonus.
I know, but this is like
no, not that. I don't think anyone's voting against him.
I know, but these are the flagship staples when you define a presidency and look back at it. Let's say a couple years after they leave office, like what defines Trump presidency? So
Greenland.
One thing that I mentioned, it'll be Petty talks about Greenland.
I mean, if he grew the size of the United States by a third, that would be
against
or however large
against all of our
Greenland
allies' wishes. The way that he has berated Ukraine's president. And kind of almost felt like he's taking the side of Russia. Also, Russia's included in this peace plan with Gaza that we talked about. He welcomed Vladimir Putin into that conversation. So a lot of interesting things going on that define him that are out of this country. And so for the person that ran on America First, you could see why people who don't feel any better than they did before he was president are a little bit irritated. Not to say that the problems around the world are not ours to consider, but people are frustrated.
Next up, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey are responding after being served grand jury subpoenas. More on that next.
5 Minnesota government officials, including Governor Tim Walz and Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, have been served with grand jury subpoenas from the Department of Justice. It's part of an investigation into an alleged conspiracy to coerce or obstruct law enforcement amid the ongoing ICE operations in Minnesota.
Also served yesterday were Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison and St. Paul Mayor Kaylee Heer. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche explained the ongoing investigation to Fox News, saying, quote, "When the governor or the mayor threaten our officers, when the mayor suggests he's encouraging citizens to call 911 when they see ICE officers, that is very close to federal crime."
Walz and Frey have called the investigation a bullying tactic meant to quell opposition. Frey posted his response to the subpoenas on X, writing, "When the federal government weaponizes its power to intimidate local leaders for doing their jobs, every American should be concerned. We shouldn't live in a country where federal law enforcement is used to play politics or crack down on local voices they disagree with." This comes as Vice President Vance is reportedly scheduled to fly to Minneapolis tomorrow to meet with local leaders.
Meanwhile, a federal judge in Minnesota is currently considering a lawsuit to stop the Trump administration's immigration enforcement surge in the state. The DOJ called the suit legally frivolous, arguing that state leaders want a veto over federal law enforcement, but the state described the officers as poorly trained and argued that the federal government is violating free speech, among other constitutional rights. Well, I know what a conservative would say in response to this. It's very simple. We can get all the ICE agents out. We just have to get local officials and Governor Tim Walz and Jacob Frey to agree to do immigration enforcement on their own. But they won't because they use sanctuary city policies. They're not going to deport anyone. They don't want to enforce the country's immigration policies. And so the federal government has come in to do that job. And it is messy, and it has resulted in, I agree, it has violated people's liberties, and that is wrong. And I don't like to see it. And people have a First Amendment right to protest ICE. And the administration seems to reject that, or will say, well, of course we support the First Amendment, except, you know, recording anyone or following anyone or telling anyone about what law enforcement is doing, all of those are protected speech. So it's a non-starter, but the simple solution would be for Jacob Frey to just enforce federal immigration laws, and then you wouldn't have any of these problems.
Well, I guess a promising sign in what you're suggesting is that J.D. Vance is headed there. So hopefully that'll be the first adult in the room to try to have a conversation. I really don't feel like hearing the conversations back and forth about who started this. Well, under Biden's policy, you became a sanctuary city. Oh, you didn't listen to me. I don't care.
Well, that is
somebody. I know, but somebody died. So an American citizen died, and that's not the goal of any immigration policy that anyone wanted. I think everyone can understand at this point that's not the incidents we'd like to see happen. And so obviously we need a few adults in the room to figure out how to best move from where we are right now. We're here. We're not under Biden. This is not 2 years ago. So we're here where we have ICE in cities. We obviously want to avoid ICE officers getting hurt, but we want to also make sure American citizens are not killed ever again. And so dialogue has to happen.
Obey law enforcement instructions and not drive their cars.
And so should Kristi Noem should not call somebody a domestic terrorist for sitting their car in the street and having other cars go around them. All right, so this feels like political retribution for that, because they're not bending the knee and because they're actually doing their job as local officials and saying we want to review and be part of this investigation, which is still ongoing. And the administration seems to think it's not, and just make their final deterrences on what will happen and when it will happen. I think there's still an ongoing investigation, and I think the local officials should be involved. This feels like political retribution, and you cannot criminalize free speech. So Governor Walz, Mayor Frey, they're allowed to say what they want in press conferences. It might rile President Trump up, get him annoyed. We know that he likes to attack when people are very curt and direct.
I mean, I want them investigated for their failure to grapple with the vast fraud in the state. That's really what I want them investigated for. I want them looked at for going easy on criminals, on fraudsters, because they wanted their votes. They were afraid of offending the Somali community. I would not presume that the Somali community would be offended to have criminals in their midst apprehended, investigated, and prosecuted. No one should be offended to have that happen. We're all taxpayers, are we not? Don't we want the money spent properly? And they shielded these people because they were afraid of offending them. So that is what should be investigated, more so than their just objection to.
But for some reason, our federal government wants to investigate them right now because of the things that they've said in and around Renee Good's killing. And I also think that that's not a great idea. I mean, if we're looking at what's happening in Minnesota, we don't want an American city to look like a war zone, right? We want calm and peace. Everyone had the same goal under Biden, that maybe there was a better way to attack immigration issues in our country.
The better way is them doing it. The better way is them doing it. But so how can you say that we don't know who started it when it's that they won't enforce the immigration laws?
No, I think
again,
that
that's
they
the
need to have a dialogue,
perspective.
and a lot of people feel
they have a dialogue. They need to enforce
immigration laws are overly aggressive to most Americans. In my lens, I read the poll.
Well, they don't have to.
And so a lot of people, it's not about not liking them. President Trump.
I find the tax laws too aggressive in this country. I still got to follow him.
President Trump doesn't get to go his way or the highway. And what we see
he's the leader of the federal government. It is his way or the highway for immigration enforcement.
No, because and when local leaders are going to call out when it's unfair. So when we talk about this investigation, we just heard that the federal government is trying to look into Renee Good's wife and see if she's part of an organization that is obstructing ICE. Like, what are we talking about? We need to figure out whether or not Renee Good deserved to be killed. No, we need to see if her actions are justified in her killing. And that's what the investigation should do.
Correct.
The federal government is looking elsewhere to prove a point that Kristi Noem already made. She preemptively made it, and she knows she was wrong, and so now she's trying to justify it. And now we're trying to look at some local leaders and try to put the spotlight on them as the bad guys. And this is nonsensical and a waste of time. I think the answer in that investigation needs to come for the American people to feel satisfied. I think local law enforcement has to be included in that investigation for people to have some trust in the government. And what the president's doing by trying to retaliate against local leaders
to do the job.
Is not okay. And neither can federal law enforcement. They convicted this girl of wrongdoing before she was even.
The job will be done.
The job will be done correctly.
Of immigration
and honestly, No. Will the job of this investigation be done correctly and honestly? Yes. Immigration, obviously, I told you the numbers are down, but the American public does not agree with this. So if Trump hangs his hat on immigration policy and how he tore up our American cities and leaves office in 3 more years and says, that's what I did. If we go with the poll numbers now, most people do not like what he did. So that's going to be his biggest claim to fame, is that I ripped people out of their cars as they're dropping their kids off to school. I did this and that. And so are you happy? And it's not even a policy that's on the books. He has a Congress that's wholly Republican right now. Pass a law about immigration if you like.
Well, but the law is, the problem is not that the law is ambiguous about the immigrants. The problem is it takes a massive amount of law enforcement resources to identify, arrest, or detain, deport them. And in blue states, they're not getting any help or participation from the local government. So that's why this looks very messy in the state of Minnesota and doesn't look messy at all in red states where you have the participation of local law enforcement. That's a good thing. I mean, on some level, blue state Democrats are getting the standoff with the feds that they want to look like they're resisting tyranny. But immigration policy is a federal issue. It's been ruled that way. Red states don't get to have more zealous immigration enforcement than the federal government allowed under Democratic governance. There's a Supreme Court case about that, when Arizona wanted to do stronger enforcement measures, and the Supreme Court said no, because it's the federal government's responsibility. It's a federal issue, and it's not being enforced in these states. I mean, again, that's what Republicans will say, and I have not heard a satisfying answer to it.
Well, local leaders
tell your Democrats to participate.
Local leaders are saying, no, you cannot come into our city and pull people out of, dropping their kids out of school, pull people out of factories when they're working. No, they're telling you
You're saying they can't, but they can.
And they're fighting against it. I mean, history in our country has been made by the people that are willing to stand up and fight against nonsense that the presidents are doing or anybody in power is doing. I mean, there's a right and wrong side of history here. And so that's just the bottom line.
Enforcing federal law is not nonsense.
No, pulling people out of factories.
You are the one who has to argue to change the law if you don't like it. You can argue to change that all these people were passing a law and saying they all get amnesty and they can remain. You can convince your fellow Americans and the legislature to do that. The state of the law is it should be enforced and they should be deported.
Well, we're going to talk about this a lot more. Up next, Matt Damon claims that Netflix wants movies to restate their plot several times over and over again. We'll tell you why. Stay with us. Actor Matt Damon went viral for a couple of comments on Joe Rogan's podcast Friday. First, he said that Netflix wants films to repeat the plot a few times in scenes to accommodate viewers who might be on their phones.
Damon and fellow actor Ben Affleck joined the Joe Rogan Experience to promote their new Netflix film, and during the discussion, Damon talked about the attention span of viewers on Netflix and how that infringes with storytelling these days. Let's take a listen.
The standard way to make an action movie that we learned was, you usually have like 3 set pieces, one in the first act, one in the second, one in the third, and they kind of ramp up, and the big one with all the explosions, and you spend most of your money on that one in the third act. That's your kind of finale. And now they're like, can we get a big one in the first 5 minutes to get somebody, we want people to stay tuned in, and it wouldn't be terrible if you reiterated the plot 3 or 4 times in the dialogue, because people are on their phones while they're watching, you know what I mean?
Then Damon and Affleck also called out the extreme level of cancel culture affecting public figures.
I bet some of those people would have preferred to go to jail for 18 months or whatever, and then come out and say, no, but we can't, I paid my debt. Like, we're done. Yeah. Like, can we be done? Like, the thing about that, getting kind of excoriated publicly like that, it just never ends.
It was a really good interview, and Matt Damon and Ben Affleck have always impressed me, and they are so thoughtful and so smart and came off really well, and I encourage people to check out more of it. And lest you think they're just complaining about, in our day, filmmaking was so much better. Ben Affleck acknowledges, I don't want to sound like an old fogey. There's a lot of advantages to making movies now. We're just saying this is really annoying to have to reiterate, the plot. And they're totally right. I was watching Netflix this morning. I was on the bike at the gym, and I finally started. I'm not like a diehard Stranger Things person. I've liked the first couple seasons. I've liked it less and less as it's gone on, but I want to finish it. So I finally started the most recent season. Mm-hmm. I'll be damned. It's exactly what he said. I've watched the first 15 minutes of it. They're like, aren't you? And like, there's instead of using the character's emotions and facial expressions and to convey what they're feeling and what they're trying to accomplish, it's very bluntly and annoyingly stated. I get it. You just can't wait to go fight Vecna, right? You're trying to. It's like to remind people, like, oh yeah, that's what. If you're not paying attention, yeah, what are they doing? They're gearing up to. It's unnatural. It's unpleasant to watch. So I saw exactly what they were talking about. And I agree, I've made this point myself, what Matt Damon just said there about cancellation, that people would have rather gone to prison than being canceled and have it be over with, than have this just stigma go on forever that's hit people really bad, like Aziz Ansari and some others. So, yeah, man, I'm going to yes-and everything I heard in that conversation.
Have you, Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, ever been to prison? I haven't, but have you?
Well, of course.
All right, so
I'm not saying
nobody wants. That's
I'm not saying prison
statement.
is easy.
Yeah, nobody wants to do that. Nobody chooses prison over getting attacked online. Delete your X account. Delete your Instagram. Okay, that part. Just be quiet. Like, I don't agree with cancel culture either, but I also don't think anybody wants to go to prison. It's not a fair. Ask anybody in prison. I'm sure that doesn't stand.
Okay, you're right about that. Although I've talked to people who would rather. Well, I won't get into that.
They rather. Okay, I want to talk about what he said because I watched His and Hers, which is blowing up on Netflix, and I was on my phone the whole time. And my friend who'd already seen it was watching it with me.
Shame on you.
I know. She was telling me, like, wait, you got to see this. You got to see this. And I was like, I get the gist. I'm looking over. But it is one of those things, like, I was kind of confused because I didn't pay attention to, like, the small moment where she, like, looked at the picture and noticed a girl was the same.
Shame on
so
you.
I'm like, okay.
This is the reason. It's people like you
Yeah.
that all these things are going to be like this. Put the phone away.
I know.
When we watch
I was studying for the show.
When we watch things in my in my household, my better half and I, the phone gets put away, and if I detect the slightest bit of not paying attention while we're watching, I will pause it.
You have rules for the TV watch? It's leisurely time.
No,
No, you are like a warden. That's ridiculous.
I want to discuss what we're seeing, and we can only discuss it if we both pay attention to it.
You want to discuss it like when it's done, or you're supposed to ask questions
when it's done, or if something happens that we want to discuss, we'll pause it and discuss it. I want it to be a collaborative storytelling experience where you process what you're seeing. It's not.
Yeah, you must watch. I must pause.
Or else we're all going to have 2-second attention spans where we're going to be down to 3-second videos, and that's all we're going to be able to pay attention to. We must fight this. We must resist it, and it starts with just being able to watch a television show or a movie uninterrupted. And if you can't do that,
someone who doesn't like rules, you have a lot of rules.
These are rules for self-improvement. That does it for us on Rising Live. Hope you weren't watching your phones while we were talking. Look out for more exclusive YouTube content coming your way later today. And be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel so you never miss any content. And for those of you listening while on the go, we're available anywhere you listen to podcasts. See you tomorrow.